There we go.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to a special episode of Nuts and Bolts Association here on Nuts and Bolts Sports. I'm one of your co-hosts, Raj Sawhney, and with me, as always,
Taylor Summers.
And Jeff Newholm.
And joining us today are two very special guests. You can see them on the screen if you're watching the video right now. We have Ashmere and Jordan both joining us. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So obviously we are going to be getting into episodes 9 and 10 of The Last Dance as we have been recapping with the previous few weeks. But what I wanted to do before we get into the sort of episodes is, Ashmere and Jordan, why don't you two tell us a little bit about what you guys have thought about the series, up to this point, since this is your first time joining us on the podcast. So Ashmere, why don't we start with you? Let us get your thoughts on episodes 1 through 8.
Yeah, sure. So I thought the series was really interesting. I mean, watching any type of production for me is something that I love to do because I love to see how all the footage came together and the interviews. And I just really enjoyed how they interviewed everybody and then showed Michael Jordan afterwards so that he could react to it. I just think it gave us the true feelings towards each thing. So it was overall, I loved it. I recorded all 10. So if I want to watch them again, I'm totally going to. So yeah.
That's awesome. And Jordan?
Specifically for the first 8, and obviously we'll get to 9 and 10, but I think this is one of the few documentaries of anything, sports, music, whatever, that just seemed to get better with each one. Just when you thought, the ending of one, was crazy, and then you get to the one where, MJ, gets emotional and tears at the end. That, I think surprised everybody, and then, it just kind of keeps going from there. So I just think, just the total access that these guys had, and to be able to see not only that, guys like MJ were a jerk at times, but also had a different, softer side that people don't generally think of, I think was cool too. And just all the basketball stuff, being this a basketball junkie, was really kind of cool to see, all the behind the scenes stuff as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, what both you guys said, because this is something that Taylor, Jeff, and I have talked about on the previous episodes, is we, because of our age group, and you guys, I think, are in our sort of age range as well. So this is not something that we really lived through. And, you can go back and watch the hardcore classics on NBA TV and whatnot, but you don't really get that deep insight the way this documentary has really dug into this material. And I just think that this, Michael Jordan's life and this Chicago Bulls team, there's no real better sort of subject matter to get this sort of documentary on. So I agree with what both you guys have said here. It's just been really incredible. But let's go ahead and get into episodes 9 and 10, and let's kind of take it, sort of topic by topic, the way the episodes have broken it down, and then I'll ask you guys for your thoughts on that. But let's sort of start with, you begin the episode with the Reggie Miller and the Indiana Pacers rivalry in the Eastern Conference Finals from 1998, which is where we left off at the end of episode 8. And this is sort of the final test for this Bulls team in the Eastern Conference. So I'll toss it to you, Jeff, first. What were your thoughts on the sort of scope of the way they portrayed this Indiana series?
I wish they would have talked about games 5 and 6. They kind of just leaped over that because they want to talk about Steve Kerr's unfortunate and tragic background with his father. But as I said on previous podcasts, it's so easy with hindsight bias to say, oh, the Bulls, everyone knew they were going to have another three-peat. That's not necessarily true if we think back on the people who were actually living through that time. And Phil Jackson even said going to Game 7 after an intense first 6 games, guys, we could lose this game. Again, it's hard to imagine now, but the Bulls were not invincible. Even the team that won 72 games, the Seattle Supersonics, pushed them to 6 games in the finals. And yet, in the end, as the Pacers said, the Bulls, Reggie Miller said the Pacers, he believes to this day the Pacers were the best team. Maybe so. But the Bulls had that, as they said, just a little bit of that championship DNA. We're just barely able to eke out a win. And were it not for that heroic effort, we wouldn't be here talking about that right now.
Taylor?
Yeah, I believe Michael Jordan said that the Indiana Pacers squad in the 97-98 was one of the toughest, if not the toughest opponent they had in the Eastern Conference that entire run, those 6-7 years prior.
I know it's not.
Like Reggie Miller said, he felt that they were the best team, but like Jeff alluded to, they had the championship DNA. That was really cool. At some point in one of the episodes, they always applauded Michael, not just obviously his athletic ability and how talented he was on the court, but his ability to stay present and in the moment, which is really key for him to not let the past dictate what was going to happen in the future. And at that moment of saying that Phil Jackson said, you could lose this game, and Michael Jordan, paraphrasing it, was saying, no, we're not losing this game, with a few expletives thrown in there as well. But just overall, it's just that was one of the few 7-game series that they endured throughout, really 2 or 3 total. So it was really cool to see the tough nitty gritty of those teams, and it came down to the last few seconds of Game 7. It was really cool.
Yeah. Ashmere, let me toss it to you now. What are your thoughts on the Indiana series?
I mean, I think you guys covered it. Essentially, it was like the turning point that we've been waiting for. And also, I just think the whole storytelling was done very well. So I don't know if episode 8 was my favorite one. I think 9 and 10 were my favorites, but I think to lead up to the 2, it was very well done. So
sure. And Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of touched on it. Definitely the Pacers were probably, the overall better team top to bottom than that Bulls team there. But, as you guys mentioned, that championship DNA that, MJ and Scotty and those guys had been through, war after war together, and they just knew exactly what they had to do to win. And, but that was, I think, something that they, obviously the fact they talk about it so much really means that they really respect that Pacers team, whether they'll come out and outright say it. But I mean, they were good. They had the size that could bother them with Rick Smits and Dale Davis. Reggie was obviously a great shooter. And you had Larry Bird, who had played against Michael numerous times. So, he better than most coaches, really had a good game plan of trying to at least contain him a little bit. But it's just another example of why they did this documentary. The Bulls were able to will themselves, past the Pacers and onto the finals.
Sure. I think that this Indiana portion of these 2 episodes might have had the standout moment for me, or a couple standout moments for me, whether it be Michael Jordan cursing out Larry Bird after they took that Game 7 off of him in the sort of back alleys of the arena. But I think my favorite part of it all was Reggie flashing back to his rookie year and saying, don't ever talk trash to Black Jesus. I just thought that was, that's kind of a through line that's been through, we talked about this pretty heavily in 7 and 8, where a couple people said things to MJ and that just sort of set him off. It doesn't matter whether it was nice or not. It's just like he got this thing in his head and he was just ready to kill you when he stepped on the court the next time. So I just thought that was really great. But I also love the sort of framing of Game 7 as well, because you obviously get the sort of heated battle between the 2 teams and how it really goes down to that last big Steve Kerr shot, sort of echoing what John Paxson did for the team earlier on in the years. But I also liked how they looped in the security and sort of Mike's quote unquote entourage into that sort of part of the episode. And they talked about Gus, who is the head of security, and how MJ really wanted to go out there and win this game for Gus. If anybody else wants to chime in on that Game 7 or Gus as a whole, does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I think one of the big things that everyone's taken away from this is that, being that as popular and as famous and as recognizable as MJ was throughout his career, I mean, he didn't and because of his, ego and attitude, he didn't have a lot of friends, like true friends. And, I've seen this a lot being a Kobe Bryant fan growing up. He was kind of the same way because he modeled after MJ. So not a lot of guys that he was hanging out with on the weekends, and especially being MJ's peak of, his fame, he couldn't go anywhere. We see him in the hotel, smoking cigars with the security staff. We see him, playing that penny game where they toss it against the wall, with the security staff. So those were his guys. And so, he definitely was motivated to go out there for Gus, who I think he had cancer, right? Was his?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, he had just been coming back, but the fact that he was able to come back for that game, and then obviously, like you said, MJ will take anything. He'll take being slighted by somebody. He'll take something or something on this end where it was, motivational thing. He wanted to win one for one of his only true friends. And he was able to go out there and they were able to get it done.
Sure. Anybody else have any thoughts on Gus or the Indiana series as a whole?
Yeah, I was say it. Go ahead, Ashmere.
I was just going to say, I thought it was funny. I don't know if anybody else was reading Twitter as they were watching it, but some people were tweeting that it was funny they had mentioned Gus before his own family members were brought in so intimately. And I thought it just played true to how important the team was to him and the people that were close to him in that environment. And like you said, he didn't have a lot of friends, and then he also didn't show a lot of compassion throughout the game. Like he always was kind of bullying the team, like, oh, you better play better next time or something along those lines. So to see that he genuinely was like worried about Gus, I don't know, it gave you like a different side of his character. So
sure, definitely. Taylor?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like what Jordan and Ashmere both said, like MJ wanted to surround himself with fatherly figures, especially after his dad tragically passed. And Gus was like a fatherly figure to him and was there and consoled him months into the short time after that had happened to MJ's dad. So he saw a lot, and there's a lot of emotion attached to that. And like I said, he always had an edge or found something to motivate him, whether Karl Malone gets the MVP or someone says something or whatever it may be. He always had something there. But it was really cool to see a genuine moment like that, and give him the game ball afterwards too. It was really special. So I think Gus said, like, it's all right. It's really all right of him to do that. So it was really cool to see that there was a human aspect, like Jordan's saying too. You don't see that much with MJ, Kobe, the guys that are just intense competitors that didn't have a big inner circle. To open that up a little bit was really cool to see.
Definitely. Jeff, do you have any closing thoughts on the Indiana series, or should we get into Utah?
Well, I just want to piggyback off what Taylor was saying with Michael Jordan's friendliness to all security staff. What I've read about Larry Bird, he was the opposite. He really didn't want to talk to other people in the media. Michael Jordan expanded his influence not only to all his teammates, but to the support staff and to much more friendly with the media too. Longitudinal studies have found that more positive relationships is the complement to emotional well-being. I thought it was so interesting. I've talked about in previous podcasts to deal with how hard it must have been to deal with this nonstop paparazzi. Michael Jordan was able to handle it so well and actually thrived in it. And this positive mindset went a long way to his success.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that 100%. I think you all sort of touched on it, this humanization of Michael Jordan that we'd seen a little bit of, and especially in those moments when like you guys said, when we were seeing him in his hotel room and him sort of isolating himself and, trying to find some sort of calm in the craziness that is his entire life. And this might have been, next to the father stuff, this might have been the most grounding part of it. And I believe, Taylor, it was you that said that, he saw Gus as a father figure after his father passed away. So I think that this really, truly brought that sort of narrative that was going through the entire series to a head. And I thought that was really great. But let's get into Utah now. And let's stick specifically with the 1997 series, because that's where episode 9 goes next. And you start with Michael Jordan talking about how Karl Malone had won the MVP, and that was his sort of driving factor going into that series. You want to give this guy MVP. I think I'm the MVP. So he's going in there motivated from that aspect of it. But then you also have young guys like Brian Russell who are in there talking trash, trying to get in MJ's head. And again, like somebody making some sort of mistake, saying something wrong to Michael Jordan and putting him in a place where he just wants to go step on that court and kill you, basically. So you start with that, and you have the Bulls taking the 2-0 lead, but the Jazz bounce back pretty soon after and win two games right off the bat after that. So the series is tied 2-2, and where I want to spend, I think, the most time in this conversation here is you get into Game 5, which is the most iconic, one of the most iconic games of Michael Jordan's career, which is the quote-unquote flu game, or what we find out here could have been the food poisoning game. I know a lot of people are saying that doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But Jordan, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts on this whole situation? The pizza guy, 5 pizza guys showing up, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard, from reading and stuff over the years, it wasn't always necessarily the flu game. It could have been food poisoning. People have called it the hangover game. They said he drank too much the night before. Whatever the case is, I don't even know if we'll ever get. I feel like we got more than we've normally gotten, but we still probably didn't get all the details. But just, insane. Like, if it was food poisoning, like I personally have had that, and I was, in bed all day, unable to move, puking. Just a mess. And I couldn't imagine getting up and going to work or just walking around, let alone going out and playing, the biggest finals game, to that date for that team against a good Jazz squad. So for him to go out there, not only just play, but play extremely well, 38 points in 44 minutes, it just adds to the lore. I mean, we already knew how great he was, but, this was just like one extra thing that we didn't even know we needed. We didn't even know we needed him to be, ridiculously sick and, have an ice pack on his head and during timeouts and stuff like that for, this to add to his, like I said, legend of being, the greatest ever. But it just was, icing on the cake. It was insane. And, I don't think you definitely would not see anybody do it today. That's for sure.
No, definitely. Ashmere?
Yeah, I agree. It's just like, well, okay, I think somebody could do it today. I low-key think Steph Curry would do it, but that's just me. But, but yeah, I just think the entire storyline, like a lot of people, probably didn't read about it back in the day to today that had known about that game. And like I mentioned before, when I was reading Twitter, everybody was like, how come we haven't investigated this pizza company? And how did they even get away with it? I feel like personally, if 5 people showed up and delivered me a pizza and like my manager and my trainer felt weird about it, I wouldn't eat it. I would just starve. So I'm surprised he even ate it, to be honest. I don't know if anybody else thought that same thing, but when he said he had like a terrible feeling about the pizza delivery people, I was like, then why'd you give him the pizza? You should have been like, oh, they burned it. I don't know. Could be me.
No, I agree, and that's something that I've seen people talking about is like, do you in any situation would you really trust 5 guys showing up delivering a pizza? Like that's not the case. That's what the trainers were saying. Like 5 guys showing up to drop off a pizza, like that just doesn't make any sense. But MJ went ahead and still just ate it. He was like, I ate the whole entire thing. Nobody else had a bite. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this?
I wanted to share my social psychology teacher in college specifically talked about that game. Before that game, everyone thought Michael Jordan was great. And he mentioned when there's a mentality about something and there's a negative factor and there's a positive event still occurs, a very strong reaction. So after Michael Jordan, despite having food poisoning, still such a magnificent game, my teacher said people thought he was God, right? An analysis I thought was Max McGee in Super Bowl I. He went caroused the night before the game, not expecting to play. Someone gets hurt, he steps in, has the game of his life. And the best of the best athletes, I don't care about all the sports science stuff, something just unquantifiable about it. But yeah, I'm with Jordan. I've had food poisoning before. I was throwing up. Hardly get around the house, hardly can drink any water. I could maybe do my job, but to not only play a basketball game, but to play in Game 5, crucial Game 5, series tied 2-2 in the NBA Finals against, of course, a very talented Utah Jazz game, and to have, I believe it was 38 points in 30 minutes. Truly remarkable. If only we could have lived personally, if only I had been a fan back then. Always reminiscing about what we missed, and that's what this documentary does so well. Those fans who are a bit younger, like I am, who missed out in the past, gives us this link to when the Immortals made the play that enshrined their image, which everyone views them today, and takes us back to that time. So I didn't know much about the food poisoning game. Now that I know, it just enhances this golden halo of Michael Jordan and makes it shine that much brighter.
I agree 100%. Taylor, why don't you close us off here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even Coach Jerry Sloan of the Jazz, I don't know if he was playing dumb or just didn't know, but he's like, oh, he was sick? I couldn't. I was the last to know. And it just was like y'all both alluded to. The flu game sounds, it rolls of the tongue easier than food poisoning or hangover game, whatever the rumors may swirl around the time as well. But it just goes to show that he was determined to win and win the game for them no matter what. And like I said, being at 50-60% of himself was still the best player on the court. Just speaks for itself. And that lasting image of him falling into Scottie Pippen's arms and like just utterly exhausted. It's a huge game. It's tied 2-2. It's a swing game that almost nearly decides the series more times than not. So he wasn't gonna. The only reason he would have been out there is if he couldn't walk or something, and even then he would have found a way to get out there. So it's like y'all said, it's the legend of Michael Jordan. That's just one of the top moments there, and they willed him to victory the next game.
I agree 100%. Jordan and Ashmere, part of why I'm so excited to have you guys on this podcast, I know Ashmere just kind of tuned out, so I'm hoping she'll hop back on while we're still talking about this topic. But I know that the two of you are pretty engaged on social media while this stuff is going on. So I kind of wanted to ask you guys, do you have any sort of theories as to what really went down here? Because there's a lot of sort of speculation and rumors and whatnot getting thrown on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, food poisoning is one. Like, if it is food poisoning, that stuff that can happen. That pizza place could have had some bad cheese, could have had bad, sauce toppings. I don't know what kind of pizza exactly he got. I think, like, honestly, the part of like the 5 people delivering, it could have been like, they didn't really elaborate too much, but like it could have been like 5, 8. It could have been like 2 guys that worked at the shop that were like 18, and then like they figured out that it was MJ, and they were like, well, let's call 3 of our buddies and let's go. Like, I don't know if it was like them going there to carry out the hit so much, more just like, oh my gosh, like, we have a chance to get somewhat close to MJ. Let's see if he opens the door. But there's like that side too. Like, they could have figured it out. Like the owner could have been like a diehard Jazz fan and been like, oh, we have some moldy cheese that I was going to toss, but here, I'll throw it on the pizza.
Right.
It's just like the whole thing is just bizarre. And like, Utah is a very passionate sports area when it comes to basketball. Like, their fans always hurl some of the worst insults, and like they're a lot crazier than people would think. So I wouldn't put it past anything to happen.
Yeah, Ashmere, since you just came back, I don't know if you heard the question, but I was saying you and Jordan are both pretty engaged on social media when this is all going on, and there's people are throwing out rumors and speculating about what actually happened, what went down during the flu game. Do you have any theories or anything that you wanted to throw out there?
I mean, I thought he had like a cold, the flu, as everybody else did. I never would have imagined it was food poisoning. So hearing the truth behind his illness was like, I don't even know, brought me to the light. I was like, that's so crazy. We would have never known if this wasn't made, right? And while like he's tweeting, hey, did you guys ever remember that flu game? Just so you know, I dropped 44 after I had food poisoning, because that's like not even his style. So
I think it's that is a very interesting point, because it's not like, especially the kind of celebrity that he is, where he was big in the 90s. He's not the kind of person that's really in touch with social media the way that, like, we're basically in LeBron's house for a few hours a day because he's just putting stuff on Instagram and whatnot. And we would just not have gotten this side of the story if Michael Jordan had not been willing to put it out in this documentary. That's just another reason why I treasured this piece of filmmaking so much, because I think it's just really giving us a window into things that, again, us people that didn't live through it had not experienced, but also people who did live through it get sort of a new window into this whole thing and get to see it from a different perspective. For time's sake, I do want to move into episode 10, but I do want to kind of give a quick shout out to the Steve Kerr plug that they gave at the end of this episode. Obviously, Ashmere, you're the big Golden State fan here. I'm your coach there, but I love Steve Kerr. I love him so much. Myself being a Cavs fan, I still can't hate Steve Kerr, just because, he's the same person then that he was now. You saw that at the rally, him making jokes and saying like, I've been holding up MJ for years now, and I just came through again. Like, him making those sort of jokes. He does the same stuff with the sideline reporters nowadays. So I just love that they took the time to give that backstory into him sort of being taken under John Paxson's wing, and then him growing into that sort of same role of a player. Since you are the Golden State fan, Ashmere, do you want to give a quick shout out to Steve Kerr?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I love the guy because he did a lot for us in the decade that we were running at the NBA. But it was also cool to learn his backstory from his own point of view, because you can tell how he stands politically these days, and it just gave everybody a true reason, and it showed who Steve Kerr was and how he's evolved into the person he is today. So just really great storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you have the sort of coalescing with Steve Kerr hitting the big shot that I just alluded to in Game 7 and really helping the Bulls secure that 1997 series against the Jazz. But let's move on into episode 10 now, this finale of this entire thing. And as it should come to no surprise to anybody, the real bulk of all of this stuff is that final series against the Jazz in 98. We had the Indiana series in the episode prior, so this was obviously the natural natural next step, but this was basically the end of this era of Chicago Bulls basketball. And what really surprised me, and you guys just talked about it here a couple minutes ago, but the environment there in Utah, yeah, that is a fan base that is very passionate. And then sticking on the Golden State topic, seeing that arena then and the way that people are talking about it, like the deafening aspect of it. I think there was a shot of like Phil Jackson with like earbuds in his ear because he didn't want to hear the sound of the crowd. It reminded me a lot of the Roracle today and that sort of environment. And I just don't feel like we get enough passion out of a lot of fan bases today that we even did in the 90s. And it was just really cool to see that and sort of have flashes to what we're seeing today. But Jeff, let me start with you. Let's start with these first few games where the Bulls really, they take a pretty steady lead here in the opening of this series, the 3-1 lead. You have the Rodman situation as well. Is there anything within those first 4 games that you want to talk about? Jeff? I'll toss it to you.
Oh, sorry, my computer kind of buzzed out there.
I know, you're
First
good.
4 games, I thought in the first 4 games, the Dennis Rodman situation, it kind of made me upset because it's a guy who just couldn't. He seemed he could never learn his lesson, but he made it work though. If I'm going to be fair, because it seemed he didn't give his team any notice. Of all things, go with Hulk Hogan for a WWE showdown? What in the world? Can you imagine that happening today? That'd be all over Twitter instantly. But the team still, they didn't suspend him because A, he's a very talented player. B, they knew, Dennis got to do his thing, but he's with us. And it may have been a decision before Game 4, but again, that's kind of hindsight bias. Even Game 3 was a 90-50 blowout. You knew Jazz were going to come back. They weren't just. They said it was even more talented than 1997 Jazz. They weren't going to just give up, so they came punched back. Even the series going back to Utah, and as I said just a few minutes ago, after Game 4, we didn't know what was going to happen, and that makes what's documentary, what we'll talk about in just a few more minutes, even more astonishing for those who were fortunate enough to live through it.
Mm-hmm. Taylor?
Yeah, those first 4 games were interesting. I believe Utah won the first one in overtime, and Chicago won the next 3. And Jeff alluded to those 96-54, the lowest point total in a game at that point in the shot clock era. And
yep.
Another funny soundbite from Jerry Sloan, like, that was the final score afterwards? Like, he was shocked. So it's cool. I mean, it's kudos to them to rebound down 3-1 to force a Game 6 after a abysmal performance in Game 3. The part with Dennis Rodman was funny. I think the security guys or the marketing people were trying to sneak him out the back door before the media could get to him. And sure enough, within seconds, they swarm him out the door, and he just got away. It was a little funny comedic relief. Like you said, we touched about it on previous episodes earlier in the documentary about one of the episodes where Dennis Rodman was highlighted there, and his antics there. Had to go to Vegas mid-season as well, so he had a long leash, to say the least. But he had his role. He knew his role as being a defensive guy, and didn't have to worry about the offense there. And he was going to give his 100% and then some when he was on the court. So his dedication wasn't tainted in that aspect. But it was always funny to see him go with Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage and all them. Just a funny little side story that thickened the plot as it got closer to the end of the series.
Yeah, this was, like you said, the second time within that season that Dennis Rodman just sort of disappeared. The first time he had a little bit of permission. He sort of pushed those boundaries. This time he didn't really have the permission. And then, he's showing up on wrestling and live TV. Like, just who knows what is going on there. Jordan, what are your thoughts on, if you want to flash back to the Vegas stuff, because we didn't get your thoughts on that, or if you want to stick specifically to this?
I mean, we've all seen all the Rodman stuff throughout this documentary. I think it's, first and foremost, there's no way he'd survive nowadays with all the social media and stuff. It would just be too much. I mean, nowadays, we'd know the second he was on a flight to Vegas, whereas we probably didn't, people didn't realize until the weekend was almost over when it got out in the news and stuff. But I think the one thing that I wish they would have touched on a little bit more was just, and I think this is why you know, you have a guy like Phil Jackson. You know, I don't know if anybody else could have coached that team. I don't think any coach in history. I mean, you could pull anybody, and I think guys like Pop and other coaches are phenomenal, have done a great job. But I don't, you know, to give him just the right amount of leash, and I guess to understand him in a way that only Phil Jackson could, was the key to making that relationship work. They talked about how they connected with the Native American stuff, and he just understood that Rodman once in a while just needed to go be away from basketball and do his thing, and then he would come back and refocus. You know, Pop would have, you know, probably. I mean, Pop already did. The Spurs pretty much got rid of him before he went to Chicago. You know, for that three-peat. So, you know, all those coaches would have been so done with him, and he was pretty much done right after that. I think it just speaks to Phil's ability to manage. You know, they always talk about coaching, you know, coaching games and trying to win games and stuff, but a big part of coaching is managing the egos, and what a group of egos and personalities that team had. It's for Phil to just delicately manage it for, you know, all those years, especially those last couple, and just to get everybody to the finish line, I think speaks to his ability as a coach and a person. I know he hasn't been very good post, you know, coaching in terms of, you know, being with the Knicks and stuff like that, you know, but you know, this generation hopefully saw that he had, you know, some real ability when it came to getting his team ready to win.
Yeah. Ashmere, before I get your thoughts on that, you know, I keep calling back to this Golden State thing, but you're repping the jersey, so I just got to call it out. But like, you know, this Golden State team obviously does get a lot of comparisons to that Bulls team because of the win totals and the championships and whatnot. But, you know, you also have a personality, not quite to the same degree, but in somebody like a Draymond Green. And so, like, you know, what are your thoughts on seeing the way that this team was structured and the way that Rodman sort of went off and did these crazy things? And how do you compare that to like the team that you're seeing like in front of you right now?
I think it's also when Kevin Durant was there too, right? He has a very introverted personality. But if Draymond Green were to act like Rodman, I don't know if he'd make it. Kind of did, but I think that he was knocked down early on, like with the kick rule. And, you know, he tried to like almost mirror that bully persona, but it got shut down so quick. And back then that wasn't the case. So now I think Steve Kerr's doing almost the same thing as Phil Jackson was. He's handling all of them very well. And then in the end, they're all very like secretive in the way that they interacted with the media too, because all the KD rumors, we didn't know if they were true. You could tell he was kind of unhappy in the last season. I could see like, okay, Kevin's for real leaving, because you can see that the chemistry is very different. And then Draymond said that whole thing on the sideline. So there's just a point where you can't fix something that's broken. And I feel like that's where the dynamic changed after all those years together. But the difference was the Bulls didn't break up a dynamic because of somebody acting out. Like, sure, MJ was always picking on people when he was a bully, but like when Rodman came back, he wasn't like, yo, you can't just dip when you feel, you know, and I feel like that's something that would happen to the Golden State Warriors if they were put in that situation. They'd be like, yo, Dre, you can't just leave because you wanted to go to Vegas for the night after we're in the middle of a series, you know? So I just think the way that it's handled, like everybody has said, it's evolved almost worse. I kind of wish you could be that like crazy and leave and come back and nobody would find out.
Yeah. That is something that has like, this is something that I've mentioned quite a bit in these sort of recaps is the dynamic of these teams and their relationship with like the media and whatnot, compared to the 90s to now. And obviously, like, you know, that's a product of evolving technology and whatnot, but it's also, you know, the players I feel like nowadays are a little bit more willing to put themselves out there. And I think they're held up to a different standard in that, like, you know, again, guys like Steph Curry and LeBron James, you know, they're doing other work outside of basketball that a few players did in previous eras, but not to the same extent. And I wonder if that is a product of social media and stuff. But then, you know, like Taylor, you're talking about how like Rodman is sneaking out the back entrance and, you know, that sort of craziness, that's also something that I just can't picture something like that happening today. Like, you know, there are situations where players refuse to speak to the media and they'll get fined. And I guess those similar rules stood back then, but there's just something about the way the league was being handled that I kind of admire. And I don't know if that's really a product of the evolving times and where we are now versus where we were then. But again, like it's just having that window, having a documentary team following this Bulls organization through an entire season and really getting that insight into all of that. I've just never seen anything quite like it. But let's kind of transition now into Game 6, the final game of this series, and sort of the closing part of this entire documentary as a whole. And Taylor, I'll toss it to you first here. Is there anything that you want to, like, before we get to sort of the final shot and whatnot, is there anything else in sort of the coverage of the Game 6 that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think like David Aldridge and a lot of the reporters chimed in as they led up throughout the game. It's just a back and forth game. It was going to come down to the wire either way, and just there's a lot of foreshadowing. It's seen obviously in hindsight. We saw it here, but Jordan was carrying the team. Pippen had the back issue. I didn't know he'd been in and out of that game that many times, or it was that back and forth. So that was very fascinating to learn more about that. And just they were mentally, physically, emotionally drained, exhausted, not just for that year, but just the whole lead up to the 6 and 8 years. And just how Jordan carried on the back. And I think even Bob Costas, the lead announcer, said like those 40-45 seconds at the end are just, that's the most purest, greatest sports experience you could ever like encapsulate it and go from, after the Stockton 3, the layup, and then, he stole the ball and made the shot. It was iconic. So it was just really, really cool to see that the build up there with the Scottie Pippen angle there, and just they had to will their way to win, and Jordan prevailed at the end there. It was really cool.
Yeah, Jeff, do you have any thoughts on like that Scotty aspect of this game? Because that was something that I was personally not aware of, and I know you're I think a little bit. You and I think are the closest maybe in age in terms of this group here. So I don't know if you had any background to that situation at all, or if it was pretty enlightening to you.
No, I had no idea. That was very enlightening. I'm a really big fan of LeBron, but I suspect he kind of embellishes injuries. A lot of goes, oh no, I'm so hurt, and next thing you know, oh, he's fine. But yeah, this is a crucial Game 6, and Scottie Pippen being sent to the locker room. It was a very serious situation, and it mattered. It's not like the Bulls like, well, we can do fine. No. Scottie Pippen, he was crucial to the team's efforts in this game, and they said at the beginning of the series they were already running on fumes. God forbid, from their perspective, if it went to a Game 7, they had to take care of it that night. So Michael Jordan, he kept short-arming shots, a sure sign that players tired, short-arming it. Yet somehow he found just that little left in the tank to finish the job.
That Scotty aspect of it is very interesting, and Jeff, you just sort of alluded to it, like not just what he had gone through and the sort of tiredness of it all, but like it was a product of the entire season basically weighing on him. Like, we're so far removed from where this 1998 season started that like I had sort of like it sort of left my mind a little bit already that that Scottie Pippen started that season not playing because he had an injury and then the contract dispute and whatnot. And then, he sort of, that weight, I think, is obviously going to play into these later parts of the season when you're playing into June for these final series. And then for him to make it that far and to sort of go down in that last game, but him saying and him being dedicated more so, I think, to his teammates and at Michael Jordan than anybody else. Like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fight. And despite whatever injury this might be, I'm going to try to hobble my way up the court. And he could barely walk. He could barely walk and make his way up and down the court. Ashmere, have you ever seen like anything quite like that, especially in today's game?
I think the only comparable moments are when Clay or Kobe had torn their Achilles and went back on the court. I think those are two situations where they hid their injuries, as you could say. So I think that's definitely, those are iconic. Come back, shoot two, and then all of a sudden they pull you off the court and you find out your injury is worse than you thought. So
yeah, Jordan, do you have any thoughts on the Scotty situation before we get into the end of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Scotty guy. I've always been a big Scotty guy. After watching this documentary, I was pretty sure going in, but after watching everything, it's 100% clear that there's not a single player that's now past or in the future that could have been that perfect second banana, if you will, to MJ. I don't think anybody else could have taken it. Scotty had just pretty much no ego, was willing to be the guy to do all the dirty work for all those championship teams. And I mean, he gutted it out. And he didn't always have great moments. He had the moment in '94 where he walks off the court. He has this beginning of the '98 season that they highlighted where he's choosing to have surgery late and miss some time. So he wasn't always perfect, but 99% of the time he did all the dirty work for that team. And like you guys alluded to, he's hobbling throughout the game. They showed the one thing, he took a screen from Karl Malone at one point, and he got up, and you would have thought he was like 55 because that's how slow he was getting up. But he kept plugging along. And I checked the numbers after the game. He only plays 25 minutes, but he gives 8 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and most importantly, he's plus 16, which is more about the impact that he makes than necessarily the numbers he puts up. So for him to gut it out there, knowing that it could hurt his next contract, because what if he injures his back to the point where he's got to have a back surgery? So there was a lot on the line for Scotty there that season, and especially that game. And he just did what he always did. He was there for his teammates as much as he could. And, I'm glad that he seemed to get a lot of mostly overall positive recognition in this documentary for all the things that he did, because nobody else could have done it with MJ.
Yeah, and that I think is maybe the shining factor of Scottie Pippen as a whole. He is certainly, in his peak time with that Bulls team, whether Mike was on the court or not. Scottie was an MVP candidate every single one of those seasons. He was the second fiddle to Michael Jordan, but he was in that top tier, top 5, top 10 players every single season that he was out there on that court winning those championships. And for him to go out there and be willing to take, the pay cuts and the less time without the ball, sit out, but like he's still going out there and having his impact. And I think that is truly what's great about Scottie Pippen. And this, like you just said, Jordan, is that's really what this documentary focused in on. And I love to see that. So let's get in now to this final sort of segment. Taylor, I'll start with you, since you sort of alluded to it a little bit, that final stretch where you have Michael Jordan, the Bulls are down 3 at this point. I believe it was 86-83. Bulls come down, Michael Jordan gets a shot, they go back, they get the steal. He gets the steal, he comes back, and you have that sort of iconic sequence, the iconic shot, like basically a frame, that beautiful frame of MJ hitting that final shot. You have a bit of the push off, if anybody wants to speculate a little bit on that. But Taylor, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on all of this as a whole? And then obviously the game coming to an end and this season capping off with the championship win for the Bulls.
Sure. To that point with Brian Russell aspect, I do believe his momentum was fading to the other direction, so I think it was very minimal push off, if you will. I mean, obviously it was there, and that could be a whole debate in itself. But like I alluded to before, it was like fascinating to see the battle with Rodman and Malone throughout. They gave each other a slap on the butt here and there because it was very competitive. They were good friends, but big rivals as well. And that point where Malone gets the ball after Jordan got that layup and it was a 1-point lead, it was just fascinating that if he'd have known that Jordan didn't clear out to the weak side there with Hornacek, but he stayed by. Kind of question. I don't know like how long he was in the paint. Jordan was there. I don't think it was like 3 seconds by any means, but it was just a beautiful instinctive play on his part to just know what was going to happen there and to steal the ball before he could get into position to post up or do one of his patented fadeaways, which just clutch. Obviously before this shot as well, and then just leading up there, you could see all the fans and everybody else just knew it was going to happen. Like you couldn't give him the last shot or the last opportunity to make that shot. He was the greatest player of all time. He's going to nail that. And sure enough, he got to his spot, like Scottie Pippen said, like when they asked him, what were you going to do? He said, just get the hell out of the way. Because there was a shot. Steve Kerr, no one else was going to make that shot there. Dennis Rodman echoed those same sentiments there. He got to his spot, the crossover back over and just swish it. That was, even though he played 2 seasons with the Wizards a few years later, like this last shot as a Bull, that's never going to be touched. It's the pinnacle of his career.
Yeah. Jeff, what were your thoughts on the closing of all of this?
I just found it remarkable how even for one of the greatest teams of all time, that margin from winning and losing is so small. I remember in 2016 when I covered for NBS, my first WNBA game, Breanna Stewart throws a full court inbound pass up to Sue Bird. Sue misses the shot, and that's certainly winning and losing. And that's just a regular season game. Now this is Game 6 between arguably one of the greatest NBA teams of all time versus a very talented Utah Jazz team. It comes down to one shot after Michael Jordan's shot. The Jazz had a shot to win it, and they got a good look. If that goes in, it could be all over. We may not even be talking about the great Bulls dynasty. You might be talking about the Bulls dynasty that almost won 6 titles, were it not for that John Stockton shot.
Mhm.
So sometimes you need fate to go erase dial on you. And Michael Jordan, as aptly demonstrated by the documentary, gave all his effort, 100%, tremendous competitor. And on that day, after he did his part, fate gave him that little push needed, even he personally didn't give any push at all.
Ashmere, I'm going to toss it to you here, and for you and Jordan both, since, like I said, this is your first time sort of joining us in this finale aspect of The Last Dance. Do you want to give us your thoughts on this, but also your sort of closing thoughts on the documentary series as a whole?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I just think the way that they ended everything with the match and talking about how the team had, come together and done that ceremony to, pay tribute to everything they had done together and how they had won that championship. I just think the way they tied the ending together was very well done. And having MJ review the interviews, like I mentioned, I thought that was it just gave us a different look on the truth. And so overall, like I said, I'm probably going to watch it again. And it was also interesting because I watched it with my family sometimes, and my mom, was from that time. So she knew a couple things, and then she would feel it was cool to see her learning, because I obviously do way more research than the rest of them because this is my job. But for her, it's just like the knowledge. And so, yeah, overall, like, amazing production.
Jordan, why don't we get your closing thoughts?
Yeah. As for the game itself, for the last couple of minutes there with the MJ steal and everything, I equate it to the line that if you've ever seen Training Day, Denzel tells Ethan Hawke, "This is chess, not checkers." That's pretty much what MJ plays. He plays chess while everyone's playing checkers in this game. He manages pretty much everything. You don't see a lot of trash talk. You don't see a lot of overall like emotion until the very end. Once he's won, he just methodically like controls the game with Pippen in and out. And Rodman's play in and out, and just waits for his time. And then that last, 40 seconds or so where he gets the layup, the steal, and then the jumper. And yeah, he pushed off. Now, was Russell going that way? Yes, but he gave him that guiding hand. But the best part is he did it and no one cares, because he was just MJ, and that's the thing that he could get away with it. So it's just an iconic sequence. It should have been an iconic end to a career. I kind of wish we could just sweep the Wizard stuff under the rug, because that would have been so perfect.
He did in this documentary. He did sweep it under the rug.
yeah, and I knew he would. There's no way that was happening. But overall, just for them to put this together, especially like reading the last couple episodes they put together, while the producers and everything weren't in the same room, they had to do it remotely because of everything going on right now. I think is even more impressive in the fact that each episode seemed to get better. The music was perfect. They had every person, athlete, political figure with Obama. You had all these people that you got to commentate, and that were such a big part of that phenomenon that we're never going to see again. Like the Warriors were big there, have been big the last couple of years. You had the LeBron Heat and Kobe and Shaq and stuff, but I don't think anything's ever going to be quite at that apex of fame and just almost immortality. I mean, those guys were, especially MJ, was looked at as a god essentially. So I was really excited to watch this. It was a much needed thing with no sports, and I can't wait to rewatch it when it comes out, like on Netflix and stuff, and just like watch, like really analyze it. Like, well, this time was all about like watch it, tweet, go back and forth. Now I just want to watch it, really study everything, and just like taking all the MJ emotional stuff. Like, I'm there for that, because like you don't get a lot of it. He's usually just this hardened guy, pretty reserved, but to see him emotional and some of the stuff was probably my favorite part.
I agree 100%, and I think I can speak for both of my regular co-hosts and Jeff and Taylor in saying that I think we three of us also can't wait to get back and rewatch this entire thing, because there's just so much to dig into, and this, there's so much detail, and yeah, like we're sort of sitting there, taking notes, tweeting, whatever it may be, and coming back and rewatching it for a second time, I think is going to be an even more interesting and enjoyable experience. But that'll bring us to a close for this discussion on the finale of The Last Dance. Thank you to everybody that joined us. The people know where they can find the three of us, but thank you to our two special guests, Jordan and Ashmere, for joining us. So do you want to let people know where they can find you guys, like online or on social media, before we get out of here? I'll start with you, Ashmere.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm pretty much all over the Nuts and Bolts Instagram, but
the hardest worker on this team.
Yeah, at this handle. And then I had the Moving the Chains pod, but who knows when football will be back. So
Sure. Jordan?
Yeah, you guys see the Twitter handle there, lower_Marion33. That's where I do most of my talking, since Twitter's always so up to date. Also have some stuff in the works that should be up on the website soon. Lots of side pieces to do off of this documentary that I think will be interesting. So should be a good time. A lot of discussion until we get some real sports back.
No, definitely. So thank you guys again for joining us. This was a lot of fun, and thank you to my regular co-host Taylor and Jeff for joining us as well. I'll be seeing you guys real soon for the next episode as we gear up for some more information that's slowly rolling out. But thank you to everybody that joined us to watch now, is watching later, or is listening later. And